Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. And today we're going to be looking at future design.
Ooh, future design.
Yeah, have you heard of this?
I have. I've heard a little bit about it, but I'm excited to dive deeper.
Yeah. So am I, actually.
Yeah.
And the thing that's really grabbed me about this whole idea of future design is that it's all about sort of creating a world that future generations would be thankful for.
Yeah, that's a really interesting concept.
Yeah. And it's funny because it sounds so obvious, right?
Right.
But like when you think about the decisions we make day to day, how often are we really thinking about the impact 7 generations down the line?
Yeah, not very often.
Not very often, right?
Yeah.
Like, am I going to take out the trash today, or am I going to leave it for my great-great-great-grandkids to deal with?
Right. It's all about the now.
Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of the core mission, I guess, of this deep dive. And we're going to be exploring this whole future design concept based on the overview chapter of a book by Tatsuyoshi Saijo. And it gets into some really interesting questions about, like, why do we seem to keep messing up the future?
Yeah. Why do we do that?
Right. Like, what is it about humans that makes it so hard for us to think long term?
Yeah, we seem to be very good at short-term thinking.
Yeah, exactly. And is there something about our social systems, too, that kind of like reinforces that short-term thinking?
Like, is it something that's inherent, or is it something that's learned, or a combination?
Yeah, and so Saijo in this book is really trying to like unpack all of that and look at some potential solutions as well.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited to see where this deep dive takes us.
Yeah, this is going to be interesting.
Yeah, so one of the first things that Saijo talks about in the book is this idea of future failures.
Future failures.
Yeah, and this is basically like the stuff that we do today that ends up burdening future generations.
Hmm.
And he's not pulling any punches. He's saying that we've already crossed some like major irreversible tipping points.
Yeah.
Yeah,
like what?
he talks about climate change, obviously,
Of course.
biodiversity loss,
Yeah.
depletion of resources. Like we've kind of already messed up some things
Right.
in a way that's going to have really long-lasting consequences.
So it seems like we're really good at messing up the future.
It kind of seems that way, right? And he connects this to what he calls the Great Acceleration.
The Great Acceleration.
Yeah, and this is, it sounds really intense.
Yeah, it does.
Right,
Yeah.
but it's basically just this period of like really rapid growth and advancement that we've seen, especially since the mid-20th century.
Okay.
And it's everything from like population growth to resource consumption to technology. Like it's all just kind of exploding exponentially.
Okay, I see. So that makes sense.
Yeah, and the thing is, he's saying that even advancements that seem positive on the surface
Interesting.
can have these like unintended consequences down the line.
Yeah. Can you give me an example of that?
So he talks about the Haber-Bosch process.
Haber-Bosch process.
Yeah, now this is something that like revolutionized fertilizer production.
Okay, so that's good. That helped us to feed more people.
It did, yeah. It was a huge breakthrough in terms of like increasing agricultural yields and, feeding a growing population.
Yeah. There's always a but.
But
Yeah.
it also enabled the mass production of explosives.
Oh, wow.
So, you have this thing that's created to help feed the world,
Yeah.
and it also ends up fueling some of the most destructive conflicts in human history.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Like, even good innovations can have some bad downstream effects.
It's like every step forward we take also creates this potential pitfall for the future.
Yeah. It's like we can't really escape that duality.
It's like a two-sided coin.
Right. It really is.
It's like we're constantly creating problems even as we're trying to solve them.
Right.
And it makes you wonder, like, is this just like baked into our DNA?
Yeah.
Are we like programmed to mess up the future? Like,
Is this human nature?
yeah, is this human nature?
Yeah, that's a big question.
So Saijo actually suggests that these future failures might be rooted in, some fundamental aspects of human nature.
Ooh, interesting. Like what?
Yeah, and he draws on the work of this primatologist, Robert Sapolsky.
Okay.
And Sapolsky points out some of our like core tendencies,
Right.
as humans.
Okay.
We're really good at relativity.
Relativity.
Yeah. So like we're always comparing ourselves to others.
Right.
We're impulsive.
Impulsive, that's for sure.
Right. Like we want things now.
Yeah, instant gratification.
Yeah, we're social creatures. We crave connection.
Yeah.
And we're optimistic.
Oh, we are.
Right. Like we tend to overestimate our chances of success.
Yeah. Maybe a little too optimistic sometimes.
Right. And so all of these things, might have been really helpful for us in the past.
Yeah.
Like they might have helped us survive.
Helped us get to where we are.
Yeah. But now they're kind of working against us.
Oh, how so?
because they're leading to this like short-sightedness,
Right.
this inability to really grasp the long-term consequences of our actions.
So we're kind of like victims of our own success in a
It's
way.
almost like that, yeah.
Hmm.
Um, and Saijo uses this really interesting quote to kind of illustrate this point.
Okay, what is it?
Um, it's from Fritz Haber,
Fritz Haber. Oh, wow.
one of the inventors of that Haber-Bosch process that we were talking about.
Okay, yeah.
And Haber apparently said, that scientists do what they find interesting regardless of the impact on society.
Ooh, wow.
So you can kind of see how that mindset, right? This
Yeah.
focus on like what's immediately fascinating or exciting
Right.
without really considering the bigger picture.
The long-term consequences.
Yeah, that can lead us down some pretty tricky paths.
Yeah, I see that it's like tunnel vision in a way.
It's kind of like tunnel vision, yeah.
Interesting.
And it makes me wonder, if it's not just scientists,
Yeah.
like if it's not just individuals.
It's our systems too.
Yeah, like do our current systems, our markets, our democracies,
Yeah.
even science itself,
Hmm.
do they lack some sort of fundamental mechanism for actually accounting for the long term?
Yeah, it seems like they're really set up for short-term thinking and short-term gains.
Yeah, it's almost like we're wired for immediate gratification.
Yeah. We want it now.
But designing a future that's sustainable
Right.
requires us to think on a completely different time scale.
Completely different, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So how do we change that?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question.
It really is.
Um, so that's where this whole idea of future design comes in.
Okay, so tell me about future design.
Saijo is basically arguing that we need to develop what he calls future ability.
Future ability.
Yeah, and this is kind of like the capacity to make decisions that prioritize the well-being of future generations,
Okay.
even if it means making sacrifices in the present.
Right.
So it's like, think about like all the decisions you make in your life,
Yeah.
and then imagine making those decisions based on how they might impact your great-great-grandchildren.
Okay, so really thinking long term.
Really long term.
Yeah. That's a big shift.
That's a huge shift, right?
Yeah.
It's like a totally different way of thinking about the world.
It really is.
And it reminds me of that Iroquois Confederacy principle,
What's that?
where they talk about making decisions with 7 generations in mind.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that.
It's like that same idea.
Yeah, that's cool.
That's really powerful.
Mm-hmm.
But the question is like, how realistic is it?
Yeah, how do we actually do that?
Right? Like, can we really expect people to think that far ahead?
It's hard enough to think about what I'm having for dinner tonight.
They know, right? So that's something that Saijo tackles head on in the book.
Okay.
And he doesn't just present this concept of future design.
Okay.
He actually dives into like specific mechanisms and techniques
Ooh, interesting.
that have been tested and shown to be surprisingly effective.
Okay, so there are ways to actually do this.
Yeah, there are ways to actually make this happen.
Okay, now I'm interested.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
are we talking like time travel here? Or
I hope so.
I don't know if we're quite at time travel yet,
Okay.
but some of these techniques are pretty mind-bending.
All right, I'm ready.
So one of the most fascinating is this idea of engaging with imaginary future generations.
Imaginary future generations.
You heard me right.
Okay, I need you to explain that.
Oh, well, I will. So imaginary future generations.
Yeah.
Okay, how does that even work?
So basically you have people in the present, right?
Yeah.
And they engage in dialogue with others who are role-playing as members of future generation.
Like acting.
Yeah, kind of like acting it out.
Okay.
And Saijo highlights this study called the Intergenerational Sustainability Dilemma game.
Okay, that sounds intense.
Yeah, it's a mouthful.
It is about there.
But basically in this game, participants have to choose between a sustainable option
Okay.
that benefits future generations,
Right.
but it requires sacrifice in the present.
Okay, so like giving up something now to help people later.
Exactly. Or they can choose an unsustainable option
Oh,
that benefits them now,
Right.
but harms the future.
Okay, classic dilemma.
Yeah, or the classic short-term versus long-term. So I'm guessing the introduction of these imaginary future folks had some impact on people's choices.
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah.
It's like you're being watched by the ghosts of Christmas future or something.
It's kind of like that, Ray. You're suddenly accountable to these people who aren't even here yet.
Yeah.
And it turns out it had a huge impact.
Woo!
Yeah, when someone represented an imaginary future generation in these discussions,
Yeah.
the likelihood of choosing the sustainable option more than doubled.
Wow.
So just giving a voice to future generations, even fictional ones, made people significantly more likely to consider those long-term consequences.
That's incredible. So just like imagining these future generations watching us can actually change our behavior in the present.
It seems that way,
Yeah.
yeah. It's like we have this innate sense of responsibility.
It's like we know we should be doing better.
Right, but we need that little nudge.
Yeah, we need that reminder.
That reminder of who we're impacting.
Yeah, and who's depending on us.
Exactly.
It's like having a future self on your shoulder whispering in your ear.
I like that.
But does this actually work outside of a controlled experiment?
That's the real question, right? Like, can we take this out of the lab and into the real world?
Yeah, because, I mean, it's one thing to make these choices in a game.
Right.
But when you're dealing with, like, real-life decisions.
Yeah, where the stakes are higher.
Exactly.
So that's where things get really interesting.
Okay, did we?
Saijo and his team, they took these ideas out of the lab
Okay.
and they conducted field experiments
Okay, like where?
in places like Bangladesh and Nepal.
Wow. So they went global.
Yeah, they really wanted to see if this could work in different contexts.
Okay, so what happened when they tried this in the real world?
So their first attempt using that imaginary future person approach
Yeah.
in Dhaka, Bangladesh,
Okay.
actually didn't yield significant results.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it seems like the participants struggled to connect with this abstract future person.
I guess that makes sense. Like, it's hard enough to relate to people who are alive today,
Right.
let alone someone who hasn't even been born yet.
Yeah.
So what do?
So they tried something different.
Okay.
They called it the Iroquois mechanism.
The Iroquois mechanism.
Yeah, you remember how the Iroquois Confederacy
Yeah.
made decisions with 7 generations in mind?
Yeah.
So instead of having one person represent the future,
Okay.
they had everyone in the group
Yeah.
take on the role of the next generation for a moment.
Oh, interesting.
So they're all making decisions from that future perspective, and then they switched back to their present-day roles
Okay.
and made the decision again.
Got it. So, like, stepping into the shoes of the future and then back to the present.
Exactly. And this time, the results were remarkable.
Really?
Yeah, over 80% of the groups in Dhaka chose the sustainable option after using the Iroquois mechanism.
Wow, that's a huge difference.
Yeah, it's amazing, right?
It's like that saying, you can't understand someone until you've walked a mile in their shoes.
Right.
But in this case, it's walking a mile in the shoes of someone who hasn't even been born yet.
Exactly. And that's the power of these future design techniques,
Yeah.
to tap into our innate capacity for this future ability.
Okay, so they didn't stop there, though, right? Like, there's got to be more.
There's another mechanism they experimented with.
Okay, tell me.
It's called the accountability mechanism.
Accountability.
Yeah, basically they asked the present generation
Yeah.
to write down justifications for their decisions,
Okay.
knowing that these justifications would be read by the next generation.
Oh, wow. So, like, writing the letter to the future?
It's kind of like that, right?
Yeah.
And you know what? That simple act of having to explain their choices
Yeah.
led to a significant increase in people choosing the sustainable option.
Really?
Yeah, it's like when you know you have to justify your actions to someone you respect,
Right.
you think more carefully.
Oh, you don't want to look bad.
You don't want to sound stupid.
Exactly.
But it's amazing that this sense of accountability works even when it comes to future generations we'll never meet.
It's like we have this built-in moral compass that activates when we think about the future.
I think you're right.
So I've got these intriguing mechanisms, but do we see any of this playing out in real-world decision-making?
Like, are there places actually using future design to shape their communities?
Yeah, I mean, these stories are great, but is this actually happening anywhere?
It is. There's a really cool case study.
Okay, tell me.
The story of Yahaba Town in Japan.
Yahaba Town.
Yeah. This town became the first to officially adopt future design principles.
Wow.
And it's a really inspiring example of how these ideas can be put into action.
Okay, I'm sold. I'm ready for the Yahaba Town story.
Okay.
So break it down for me. What are these 6 principles of future design?
Well, they're really all about like how to actually put these ideas into practice. You know, make them work in the real world.
Yeah, make them happen.
So one of the key principles is transparency.
Okay, transparency makes sense.
Yeah, so it's about making the whole future design process open and accessible to everyone.
So no secret societies making decisions about the future.
Exactly. Everyone gets a say.
I like it.
What else?
Another important one is community ownership.
Okay, so it's not just like experts dictating the future from on high.
Right, it's about empowering the community to shape its own destiny.
That's really cool.
Yeah, and then there's this principle of fading away.
Fading away. Okay, now you've got me intrigued. What's that all about?
So basically, the researchers who introduce future design to a community,
Yeah.
they should gradually step back
Okay.
and let the community take ownership of the process.
So it's like they're planting a seed and then letting it grow.
Yeah, exactly. It's about giving people the tools and then trusting them to use those tools to create the future they want.
That's a powerful idea.
Yeah, and it's not just a theoretical idea. This actually happened in Yahaba Town.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so when they were developing the comprehensive plan for the town,
Okay.
the town hall staff took the lead,
Okay.
and the researchers intentionally faded into the background.
Wow. So did it work? It did. The town hall staff found they could facilitate the future design process on their own.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And they even discovered a newfound sense of agency and creativity in their work.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, they were no longer just following orders.
Right.
They were actively shaping the future of their town.
That's what it's all about.
And Saijo is really passionate about the shift from individualistic to collective thinking.
Yeah.
He envisions future design as a catalyst for what he calls a quiet revolution, where citizens reclaim sovereignty.
Now that's a revolution I can get behind.
Right. But let's be real for a second.
Okay.
We live in a world dominated by existing systems and institutions,
Yeah.
many of which are resistant to change.
That's true. Like, how do we actually integrate future design into these, like, often really rigid structures?
Right. It's a big challenge.
It is.
And Saijo tackles it head on in the book.
Okay.
He analyzes the limitations of some traditional approaches, like Domeni's voting method.
Domeni's voting method. I'm not familiar with that one. What is that?
So it was this idea of trying to give future generations a voice by granting voting rights to children.
Oh, wow. So, like, kids could vote.
Well, kind of. Their parents would vote on their behalf.
Okay, I see.
But studies have shown that it can actually backfire.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because parents might end up prioritizing their own short-term interests
Yeah.
over their children's long-term needs.
Like, yeah, I'm voting for more candy today, even if it means no teeth tomorrow.
Exactly. It's adding complexity without really addressing the root of the problem.
Yeah.
He also talked about Rawls' veil of ignorance.
Oh, yeah. I remember that from philosophy class.
Yeah, so Rawls' idea was that people should make decisions as if they didn't know their place in society
Okay.
to promote fairness and impartiality.
Right.
But Saijo argues that it doesn't necessarily lead to decisions that benefit future generations.
It's still missing that, like, intergenerational piece.
Exactly.
So if these traditional approaches don't really cut it,
Mm.
what are some more promising avenues?
Well, Saijo points to the Well-Being of Future Generations Act in Wales.
That's a really compelling example.
What's that all about?
So this law actually requires public bodies to consider the long-term impact of their decisions.
Okay, so like baked into the legal system.
Yeah,
Exactly.
that's amazing. Are there other examples like that?
There are. He also discusses the potential of citizens' assemblies.
Okay, what are those?
These are randomly selected groups of citizens
Okay.
who deliberate on important issues
Okay.
and make recommendations.
So kind of like future design workshops, but on a bigger scale.
Exactly.
That's cool.
Yeah, so as we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
what are some of the key takeaways you hope listeners will walk away with?
Yeah. What should we be thinking about as we go out into the world?
Well, I think the most important takeaway is that we actually have this capacity for future ability within us.
Yeah, it's not like it's something alien to us.
Right. We can make decisions that prioritize the well-being of future generations.
We just need to figure out how to do it more often.
Exactly. The problem is our systems often discourage or even prevent us from exercising that capacity.
Right.
So future design offers a set of tools and principles for overcoming those barriers.
Okay, so it's like a roadmap for creating a better future.
Yeah, and unlocking our potential to create a truly sustainable and thriving world.
I love that. It's both empowering and challenging
It is.
because it's telling us that we have the power to change things,
Right.
but it also demands that we rethink some of our most deeply ingrained assumptions.
Exactly.
It's like a call to action disguised as a philosophy lesson.
I like that. And Saijo leaves us with a really thought-provoking question.
Okay, me.
If you could design a future-proof version of your town, city, or even your country, what one change would you prioritize?
Ooh, that's a good one. It's like taking all these big ideas and making them personal.
Exactly. And if you're ready to dive deeper into this world of future design, I highly recommend checking out Saijo's book.
Yes, I second that. It's a book that can really change how you see the world and your role in shaping the future. And remember, everyone, the future isn't something that just happens to us. We have the power to create it.
That's right.
So let's start designing a future worth inheriting. A future where generations to come can look back and say, thank you.
Absolutely. And I